He's the one who entered the room, said the quiet boy to the police officer. Years later, the truth shocks. Tyler Johnson's silence had lasted exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days. Melissa knew because she counted every morning she woke up, hoping to hear her youngest son's voice. Every night she lay down with her heart heavy from the absence of those words she so longed to hear again. Now, in the Pittsburgh courthouse, the 14-year-old boy was sitting in the witness chair, his brown eyes fixed on the waxed wooden floor. The orange uniform he wore by the judge's order contrasted with his pale skin, the result of months without properly leaving the house. His small hands trembled in his lap, and Melissa had to hold back her own tears seeing her son in that state. "Tyler," called prosecutor Dr. Benjamin Taylor, adjusting his glasses, "can you tell us who entered your grandmother's room that September night?" The boy slowly raised his eyes. For a moment that seemed eternal. Only the noise of the fans broke the heavy silence of the crowded courtroom. Melissa held her breath. Beside her, Michael Patterson, her husband of 5 years, wiped sweat from his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief. Tyler raised his right arm with a slow and deliberate movement. His index finger pointed directly at Michael, who was sitting in the first row of the audience. "Him," whispered Tyler, and his hoarse voice echoed through the courtroom like distant thunder. "He's the one who entered Grandma's room." Melissa felt the world spin. Michael turned white as a sheet, his lips moving without making a sound. The woman beside him, who had supported him for months, instinctively moved away. The low murmur that spread through the room was immediately silenced by the judge's gavel. "Order," shouted Judge William Harris. "Silence in the courtroom." Melissa looked at her husband, then at her son, trying to process what had just happened. For 2 years, she had defended Michael against all the family's suspicions, against the distrustful looks from neighbors, against the malicious insinuations that circulated in the small town where they lived. Michael Patterson was a respected man in Pittsburgh. Owner of a prosperous auto repair shop, he had married Melissa when Tyler was just 7 years old, and Brandon, the oldest son, was 17. Since then, he had cared for both boys as if they were his own children, helping Melissa raise the boys after their biological father abandoned them. The night that changed everything had happened on a Friday in September. Mrs. Dorothy, Melissa's mother, was sleeping in the guest room of the family home when Tyler found her unconscious on the floor, near the dresser where she kept her savings. The boy had screamed so loudly, he woke the entire neighborhood. When the ambulance arrived, Mrs. Dorothy was conscious but confused, with a bump on her forehead and unable to remember exactly what had happened. The doctors said it could have been a common fall for someone 72 years old, but the family always suspected there was something more. Tyler, who until then had been a talkative and smart child, simply stopped speaking the next day. No matter how many doctors Melissa consulted, how many therapies she tried, the boy remained in absolute silence. Until that moment, in the courtroom. "Tyler," continued the prosecutor, his voice softer now, "can you tell us exactly what you saw?" The boy shook his head no, tears finally streaming down his cheeks. Melissa rose from her chair, but was stopped by the security guard. "He said enough for today," declared the judge. "The session is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, Melissa walked beside Michael in silence. The man she loved, who had transformed her life and that of her children, walked with his head down, hands in the pockets of the navy blue dress pants he only wore on special occasions. "Melissa," he finally said, stopping on the sidewalk, "I swear on my mother's memory that I never harmed Mrs. Dorothy. I never even entered her room that night." Melissa wanted to believe him. With every fiber of her being, she wanted to believe, but the image of her son pointing at her husband was burned into her mind like a hot iron. "Michael, she began, but couldn't finish. "I understand," he said, taking off his wedding ring. "I'll stay in the apartment above the workshop until all this is resolved. You need to take care of Tyler now." That night, Melissa put Tyler to bed in his own room. The boy had returned to silence, but his eyes were different. There was a deep sadness there, as if carrying that secret for 2 years had aged his soul. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Therapy with Dr. Rebecca Wilson began the following week. Tyler communicated only through drawings, scribbles made with colored pencils on A4 sheets that the psychologist provided. The drawings were always dark, full of shadows and undefined figures that seemed to be hiding behind doors. "He's processing a very deep trauma," Dr. Rebecca explained to Melissa during a consultation. The fact that he spoke in court was a significant breakthrough, but now he's regressed again. It's normal. Melissa looked at her son's drawings spread out on the psychologist's table. In one, a small figure was lying on the floor, while a large shadow loomed over it. In another, the same small figure was hiding behind a half-open door. "Doctor, these drawings, do they show what happened that night?" "It's possible. Children often use art to express what they can't verbalize, but we need to be careful with interpretations. The mind of a traumatized child can mix reality with fear, present with past." Meanwhile, Michael lived alone in the small apartment above the workshop. His routine had been reduced to working from 7 in the morning to 6 in the evening, going up to the apartment, heating up a meal, and watching television until he fell asleep on the sofa. The regular customers still respected him, but some new ones avoided his workshop after the rumors that spread through the town. Brandon, Melissa's oldest son, had returned from college in Philadelphia as soon as he heard about the trial. At 22, a law student in his final semester, he felt responsible for not being present when the family needed him most. "Mom, I should have stayed here," said Brandon as he helped organize Mrs. Dorothy's medications. She had come back to live with them after the incident. "If I had been home that night, none of this would have happened. Your place was at college, son. You couldn't have guessed what was going to happen." Brandon watched Tyler playing alone in the backyard. His younger brother had always been his favorite, that smart boy who asked 1,000 questions a minute and followed Brandon everywhere when he was little. Seeing Tyler in that state of silence was like having a piece of his own heart torn out. Mrs. Dorothy had regained most of her mental faculties, but still had moments of confusion. Sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, she would ask where Michael was, as if she had forgotten the whole situation. Other times she would become agitated near her own room, as if something there bothered her. "Melissa," her mother called one Thursday afternoon as they were peeling potatoes in the kitchen. "That man, Michael, is he good to you?" It was a question Melissa asked herself every day. Michael had been the best man she had ever known, hard-working, affectionate with the children, respectful toward her and Mrs. Dorothy. He never drank too much, never raised his voice at home, never showed any sign of violence. "I thought so, Mom. I really thought so." Winter came early that year in Pittsburgh. Tyler began having terrible nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, pointing to the dark corner of the room and trembling with fear. Melissa slept with him every night, holding her son's small hand until he fell back asleep. During one of those nights, Tyler whispered something that chilled Melissa's blood. "He's coming back, Mom. He always comes back." "Who's coming back, sweetheart?" asked Melissa, but Tyler had already fallen back asleep. The official investigation had been closed due to a lack of conclusive evidence. There were no signs of a break-in at the house. Nothing had actually been stolen, and Mrs. Dorothy couldn't remember specific details of what happened. The case would have been shelved if it depended solely on the technical facts. But Tyler's testimony had changed everything. The boy was the only witness, and his word, even after 2 years, carried legal weight. Michael would be charged with breaking and entering and assault, crimes that could result in jail time. Mr. Andrew Miller, Michael's lawyer, was an experienced man who had known the Patterson family for decades. He himself couldn't believe the accusations against his client. "Michael," he said during a conversation in his office, "I need you to tell me everything you remember from that night. Every detail could be important." Michael took a deep breath, running his hands through his graying hair. "I worked late at the shop that Friday. There was a truck with engine trouble, and the owner needed to travel early Saturday morning. I got home around 11:30 at night. Melissa was already asleep, the boys too. I took a shower, ate something in the kitchen, and went to bed." "Did you enter Mrs. Dorothy's room at any point?" "Never. Not that night or any other. Her bedroom door is in the main hallway. You pass by it to go to the bathroom or the kitchen, but I never went inside." "And when did you find out what had happened?" "It was when Tyler screamed. I woke up startled, thought someone was trying to break into the house. When I saw the boy standing at his grandma's door, screaming, I ran to see what was going on. Mrs. Dorothy was on the floor, a bit dazed. That's when we called the ambulance. Mr. Andrew took notes as he listened. There was something in the story that didn't quite fit, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The criminal case against Michael moved slowly, as is common in the American justice system. Meanwhile, the Johnson family's life was falling apart more each day. Melissa had lost her job at the school where she worked as a custodian because she was often absent taking Tyler to doctor's appointments. Brandon had to drop out of college and come back home for good. He found a job at a hardware store to help with the family's expenses. In his free time, he tried to investigate on his own what had happened that night, talking to neighbors, looking for clues the official investigation might have missed. It was during one of these informal investigations that Brandon discovered something intriguing. Mrs. Barbara, the next-door neighbor, mentioned seeing a strange car parked on the street in the early hours of that Friday. It was a dark car. I'm not sure about the make, Mrs. Barbara said, while watering the plants in her front yard. I thought it might be someone's visitor, but I found it odd because it was so late. Do you remember what time it was? Must have been around 2 in the morning, thereabouts. I woke up to use the bathroom and saw it from the window. The car stayed there for about 15 minutes, then left. Brandon mentally noted the information. If there was a strange car on the street, maybe the break-in had been committed by someone outside the family. But that didn't explain why Tyler had specifically pointed to Michael in court. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The therapy sessions with Tyler continued 3 times a week. Dr. Rebecca noticed that the boy's drawings were gradually changing. The shadowy figures began to take on more defined characteristics, faces that sometimes looked familiar. Melissa, the psychologist said during a private consultation, I need to talk to you about something important. Tyler's drawings are showing inconsistencies. What do you mean, doctor? Dr. Rebecca spread several drawings on the table. In some, the figure representing the attacker had features that resembled Michael: height, build, hair. In others, the same figure was completely different, thinner, younger, sometimes even with features that resembled Brandon himself. It's as if his memory is fragmented or confused. This can happen when a child witnesses something traumatic. The mind mixes people, events, fears. Melissa looked at the drawings with renewed attention. In one of them, there were 2 figures in the scene, one lying on the floor and 2 shadows around it. She had never noticed this detail before. Doctor, this drawing here shows 2 people? That's what it looks like. Tyler may have seen 2 people that night, or he may be confusing different events. We need to be very careful with interpretations. This revelation changed everything for Melissa. If Tyler had seen 2 people, why in court did he point only to Michael? And who would the second person be? That night, Melissa decided to try to talk directly with Tyler. The boy was lying in bed, flipping through a Dennis the Menace comic book without really reading. Tyler, she said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Mommy needs to ask you some questions. It's very important. The boy looked up but said nothing. That night in Grandma's room, did you see only one person, or were there more people there? Tyler's eyes immediately filled with tears. He shook his head no, then yes, then no again, as if confused. It's okay, my love. You don't have to be afraid to tell me the truth. Tyler opened his mouth as if to speak, but then closed it again. His hands were visibly trembling. I can't, he finally whispered. Why can't you, my love? Because if I tell, I'll break our family. That phrase echoed in Melissa's mind for days. Tyler was protecting someone, but who? And why had he pointed to Michael if he knew there was another person involved? Mrs. Dorothy, meanwhile, began to have clearer memory flashes. During dinner on a Tuesday, she suddenly stopped eating and stared fixedly at Brandon. Melissa, she said slowly. That night, I remember hearing a familiar voice. What do you mean, Mom? When I was lying on the floor before passing out completely, I heard someone whispering. It was a voice I knew, but it wasn't Michael's. Brandon felt a chill down his spine. "Do you remember whose voice it was, Grandma?" Mrs. Dorothy shook her head slowly. "I don't know. It was familiar, but I can't remember." Melissa looked at her two sons and her mother. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind, but she immediately pushed it away. She couldn't think that about her own son. Winter was coming to an end when Michael received an unexpected visit at his apartment. It was Tyler, alone, standing at the door with his hands in his coat pockets. "Tyler!" Michael bent down to be at the boy's level. "What are you doing here, son?" Tyler looked around as if checking that no one was watching, then entered the apartment. Michael closed the door and sat on the sofa, waiting for the boy to feel comfortable enough to speak. "Mr. Michael," Tyler finally said, his voice low and full of guilt. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what, Tyler?" "I lied in court. You didn't do anything wrong to Grandma." Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Why did you say it was me then?" Tyler began to cry. "Because I was scared. When the prosecutor asked who went into the room, I got confused. I saw who it was, but if I told the truth, it would destroy my family." "Who was it, Tyler? Who went into your grandmother's room?" The boy looked at Michael with eyes full of tears. "It was Brandon." The revelation hit Michael like a bolt of lightning. Brandon, Melissa's eldest son, the young man he had helped raise and loved like his own. Brandon? But why? He was in trouble at college. He owed money to some guys from Philadelphia. He came back secretly that night to take the money Grandma kept in the dresser, but she woke up and they argued. She fell and hit her head. Tyler sobbed as he told the story. "I was going to the bathroom when I heard the noise. I saw everything through the crack in the door. Brandon was desperate, trying to help Grandma, but she had fainted. He got scared and left." "Why didn't you say this before, Tyler?" "Because Brandon is my brother. He always took care of me, always protected me. I couldn't turn him in, but when they asked in court, I had to point to someone. Everyone was waiting for an answer." Michael hugged the boy, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief to know he wasn't going crazy, that he really hadn't done anything wrong. Sadness to understand the weight Tyler had been carrying for 2 years. "Tyler, you need to tell your mother this." "I can't. If I tell, Brandon will be arrested. He's all my mother has since my father left. Son, keeping this secret is destroying you, and it's destroying your family too. Your mother and I aren't together anymore because of this." Tyler cried even harder. "I know. I ruined everything." "You didn't ruin anything. You were just a scared child trying to protect your brother. But now you're older, stronger, and sometimes doing the right thing is hard." During the following days, Tyler became even more withdrawn than before. Melissa noticed that he barely ate, slept poorly, and spent hours staring out the window as if waiting for something. Brandon, in turn, seemed increasingly agitated. He had gotten a better job at a construction company in town, but he was always nervous, jumping at any unexpected noise. One night, Melissa woke up to low voices coming from the kitchen. It was almost 2 in the morning. She went down the stairs quietly and saw Brandon sitting at the table with Tyler standing beside him. The two were talking in whispers. "You have to stop this, Tyler," Brandon was saying. "You can't go on like this forever." "But what if they find out? What if someone knows?" "No one is going to find out anything. That was an accident. Grandma fell on her own, understand? That's what happened." Melissa felt her heart race. There was something about that conversation that wasn't right. She hid behind the kitchen door to hear better. "Brandon," Tyler said with a trembling voice, "I can't keep the secret anymore. Mr. Michael is suffering because of us." "Michael has nothing to do with this. Leave him alone in his apartment." "But he didn't do anything wrong." "And did I?" Brandon's voice grew louder, then he controlled himself again. "That was an accident, Tyler. I just wanted to borrow the money. I was going to pay it all back after I graduated." Melissa covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming. Her oldest son, the young man she loved so much and in whom she had placed all her hopes, had been responsible for what happened to Mrs. Dorothy. "Grandma shouldn't have woken up," Brandon continued. "I waited until she was asleep, went into the room slowly, but she heard something and woke up. When she saw me, She got scared and tried to scream. I just tried to stop her from waking up the whole house, but she lost her balance and fell. And you left and just let her there. I panicked, Tyler. I didn't know what to do. She was unconscious but breathing. I thought she would be okay. Melissa had to hold onto the wall to keep from falling. Everything made sense now. The strange car that Mrs. Barbara had seen on the street, the confusion in Tyler's drawings, the familiar voice that Mrs. Dorothy remembered hearing. "Why did you let them blame Michael?" asked Tyler. "I didn't let them. You were the one who pointed at him in court. I never asked you to do that." "But you also never said it was you." Brandon was silent for a long moment. "Because I'm a coward, Tyler. Because I'm afraid of going to jail, of disappointing our mother, of losing my future. I know it's wrong, but I can't find the courage to confess." Melissa couldn't take it anymore. She walked into the kitchen, and both boys froze when they saw her. "Mom!" Tyler ran to her, hugging her waist. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I heard everything," said Melissa, looking directly at Brandon. "How could you?" Brandon lowered his head, unable to find words. "How could you let Michael be accused of something you did? How could you watch your brother suffer for 2 years, keeping a secret to protect you?" "Mom, Brandon began, but his voice failed. "No." Melissa was furious now. "There is no excuse. You destroyed this family. Tyler stopped speaking because of you. Michael lost everything because of you. I lost the man I love because of you." Tyler kept hugging his mother, crying silently. "Mom, please," said Brandon, finally looking at her. "I was desperate. I owed money to dangerous people in Philadelphia. They threatened to hurt me if I didn't pay." "And why didn't you come talk to me? Why didn't you ask for help?" "Because I was ashamed. I lost the money gambling, Mom. I got involved with some friends and lost all the money you sent for my college expenses and a lot more that I borrowed." Melissa sat in the kitchen chair, feeling the weight of the revelation. Her son, who she thought was perfect, who was her pride and hope, had addictions she knew nothing about and had harmed the whole family to hide his mistakes. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and difficult decisions. Melissa spent sleepless nights trying to understand how things had gotten to that point. Tyler, finally free from the weight of the secret, began to speak again, but his words were filled with guilt and remorse. Brandon isolated himself in his room, only leaving for work. He knew the time of truth had come, but he still struggled with the fear of facing the consequences of his actions. Mrs. Dorothy, little by little, began to remember more details of that night. With Melissa's revelation about the intruder's true identity, the elderly woman's memories began to reorganize. "It was Brandon, after all," she said one Sunday morning while having coffee with Melissa. "I remember now. When I opened my eyes and saw him rummaging through my dresser, I got so scared I tried to get up too quickly." "Aren't you mad at him, Mother?" "I'm sad, Melissa, very sad. But mad, I don't know. The boy was desperate. I know he didn't mean to hurt me." Melissa admired her mother's capacity for forgiveness, but she herself still couldn't fully process what had happened. The most difficult decision Melissa had to make was what to do with the information. Michael Patterson was being unjustly prosecuted. His reputation had been destroyed. His life had been turned upside down. He deserved to know the truth, deserved to be cleared. On a Thursday afternoon, Melissa went to Michael Patterson's workshop. He was under a car, fixing something in the engine, as he always did when he wanted to forget his troubles. "Michael," she called. He came out from under the car, surprised to see her there. It had been months since she'd shown up at the workshop. "Melissa, is something wrong? I need to talk to you. It's about Tyler. About that night." Michael wiped his hands on a rag and led them to the small office at the back of the workshop. Melissa told him everything. Tyler's confession, the conversation she had overheard between the sons, Mrs. Dorothy's recovered memory. Michael listened to everything in silence, his face going through a series of emotions: surprise, sadness, relief, disappointment. "So it was Brandon," he said finally. "That boy I helped raise, who I considered a son." Michael, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything you've been through because of us. And now, what are you all going to do? I don't know. Brandon is my son, but you also don't deserve to pay for something you didn't do. Tyler has already suffered too much keeping this secret. And you've lost everything. Michael stood up and walked to the window overlooking the street. Outside, life went on as normal. People walking, cars passing, children playing. It was hard to believe his own life had been completely destroyed. Melissa, he said without turning around, I'm not going to sue you or anything like that, but I need the truth to be told. I need my dignity back. I understand. And Brandon? He needs to face the consequences of what he did. Not just with me, but with the whole family, with Tyler especially. Melissa agreed silently. She knew Michael was right, but that didn't make the situation any less painful. That night, the family gathered in the living room. Mrs. Dorothy was sitting in her favorite armchair, Tyler on the sofa next to Melissa, and Brandon in a separate chair, as if he had already unconsciously placed himself on the margins of the family group. Brandon, said Melissa, you are going to tell everything to Mr. Andrew Miller and the prosecutor. Michael is going to be cleared, and you are going to take responsibility for what you did. Brandon nodded slowly. I know I have to do this. I'm very scared. Scared of what? Asked Tyler. Scared of going to jail, scared of not being able to graduate, scared of disappointing you even more. Son, said Mrs. Dorothy in a soft voice, you have already disappointed us. Now it's time to earn back our trust by doing the right thing. Brandon's formal confession took place on a rainy Monday in September, exactly 1 year after the original incident. In Mr. Andrew Miller's office, with the prosecutor, Dr. Benjamin Taylor, and a court reporter present, Brandon told the whole truth. He detailed the financial problems he had in Philadelphia, the gambling debts he had accumulated, the desperation that led him to sneak back home that night. He explained how he had entered his grandmother's room to borrow money, how she had woken up and gotten scared, resulting in the fall that left her unconscious. And why didn't you tell this before? Asked the prosecutor. Because I'm a coward, Brandon answered simply. Because I only thought of myself and let other people pay for my mistake. The case against Michael was dismissed immediately. The charges were dropped, his criminal record was cleared, and he received an official apology from the state. Brandon, in turn, was indicted for breaking and entering a negligent assault against Mrs. Dorothy. Since he was a first-time offender and the crime had not been committed with the intent to cause harm, Brandon was sentenced to community service and payment of a fine. He would not go to jail, but he would carry the mark of that mistake for the rest of his life. The family's reconciliation was slow and painful. Tyler, finally free from the weight of the secret, began to show signs of recovery. He returned to attending school regularly and resumed some social activities, although he still remained more reserved than before the trauma. Melissa struggled daily to forgive Brandon. As a mother, her love for him was unconditional, but as a woman who had lost a relationship because of his lies, anger still pulsed strongly in her heart. "Mom," Brandon said one night while the two were alone in the kitchen. "I know you can't forgive me yet." "Brandon, forgiveness isn't just a matter of wanting to. It's a process. You lied to me, let your brother suffer, destroyed a good man's life. All of that has consequences." "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did." "How?" "First, I'm getting help. I sought treatment for my gambling addiction. I'm attending a support group in Pittsburgh." Melissa didn't know about her son's decision. It was an important step, even if late. "Second," Brandon continued, "I want to pay for all the expenses you had with lawyers, therapy, medication because of my mess." "With what money? You barely earn enough to support yourself." "I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. I'll go back to night school and get a law degree to help people who go through what Michael went through. I'll turn my mistake into something useful." Melissa looked at her son and saw both the boy he had been and the man he was trying to become. The road would be long, but there was hope. The relationship between the brothers also needed to be rebuilt. Tyler felt a complex mix of emotions toward Brandon: brotherly love, Anger for the situation he was put in, guilt for having lied to protect him. "Tyler," Brandon said one Saturday afternoon when he found his younger brother reading in the backyard, "can I sit here with you?" Tyler nodded, but didn't stop reading. "I know you're mad at me." "I'm not mad," Tyler said without looking up from his book. "I'm sad." "Sad why?" "Because you were my hero. I wanted to be like you when I grew up, and I found out you're someone who does wrong things and lets others pay for them." Tyler's words were like a stab to Brandon's heart. Hearing that from a 14-year-old, especially from his younger brother, was devastating. "You're right to feel that way. I don't deserve to be anyone's hero." "But I still want to have an older brother," Tyler said, finally looking at Brandon. "So you'll have to earn that again." "How?" "By being honest. Always. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." The most difficult conversation left was between Melissa and Michael. She knew he deserved a personal explanation, a face-to-face apology. But she didn't know if she would have the courage to face the man she had lost because of her family's mistakes. One Saturday morning, she gathered her courage and went to the workshop again. Michael was organizing parts in the storage room, a job that would normally be done by an assistant, but he had let all his employees go to cut costs during the difficult months. "I came to apologize," Melissa said directly, without beating around the bush. Michael stopped what he was doing and turned to her. "You're not the one who should apologize, Melissa. I'm his mother. I'm responsible for him. Brandon is a grown man. His decisions are his own. But the consequences of those decisions fell on you." Michael sighed and leaned against the workbench. "Melissa, I won't pretend I wasn't hurt. I lost you. I lost the family I considered mine. I lost clients. I lost the reputation I built over years. But I understand you were protecting your children. I should have believed you. You believed your son. As a mother, that's what you had to do." Melissa felt tears streaming down her face. "You were always too good for us." "It's not about being too good. It's about love. I truly loved you and your children, including Brandon, despite everything. And now? What happens now?" Michael thought for a long moment before answering. "Now you need to heal as a family. Tyler is getting better, but he still needs stability. Brandon has to learn to be a real man. Mrs. Dorothy deserves to live her final years in peace. And you need to learn to trust people again." "And us?" asked Melissa, though she already knew the answer. Maybe we can be friends someday, when the wounds heal, when we're all whole again." Melissa nodded, though her heart was broken. She knew she had lost Michael forever, not from lack of love, but because some scars are too deep to allow trust to be completely restored. The first Christmas after the truth was revealed was different from all previous ones. The family gathered, but there was a palpable sadness in the air. Tyler had made great progress in his recovery, speaking normally and even cracking some jokes, but he still had moments of deep introspection. Brandon was thinner, more serious, carrying the weight of his decisions in every gesture. He worked days at the construction company and studied nights at a private law school, paying his own tuition with great sacrifice. Mrs. Dorothy, surprisingly, was the one who showed the most serenity. At 73, she seemed to have reached a deep acceptance about the events that had shaken the family. "Melissa," she said during Christmas dinner, "have you spoken to Michael today?" "No, Mom. Why?" "Because it's Christmas, and at Christmas we remember the people we love, even when they're no longer with us." Tyler looked at his mother. "Do you still love Michael, Mom?" The question caught Melissa off guard. "Why do you want to know that?" "Because I miss him. He was good to me, and I know he didn't do anything wrong." "I miss him too," Brandon said unexpectedly. "I know I don't have the right after what I did, but he was like a father to me for years." Melissa looked at her children and her mother. All of them had lost Michael because of a lie, a cowardice, a sequence of wrong decisions. "Yes," she finally admitted. "I still love Michael. Very much." "Then why don't you get back together?" asked Tyler. "Because love sometimes isn't enough, my son. Sometimes we hurt a person so much that love can't heal all the wounds. Mrs. Dorothy raised her trembling hand and touched her daughter's face. My dear, I've lived 73 years in this world. I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot. And I've learned that time heals wounds we think will never mend. But he said maybe we can be friends someday. Friends, Mum. Nothing more than that. One day at a time, Melissa. One day at a time. The following months brought small changes that together represented big transformations. Tyler went back to playing soccer with his school friends, something he hadn't done since before the trauma. His grades improved, and he even started showing interest in learning to play guitar. Brandon dedicated himself to his studies with an almost obsessive determination. He had completely stopped gambling and religiously attended support group meetings. In the few free hours he did small repairs around the family home, trying to contribute in some practical way. Melissa went back to work, this time at a private school where she got a job as an administrative assistant. The salary was lower than what she earned before, but the routine helped keep her mind occupied. Michael, little by little, regained some of his old clients. His reputation was slowly being restored, though some damage was permanent. He hired an assistant again and was managing to stabilize himself financially. The unexpected reunion happened on a Thursday in March at the downtown supermarket. Melissa was in the cleaning products aisle when she saw Michael choosing laundry detergent. They stood still, looking at each other, not quite knowing what to do. "Hi," Melissa said simply. "Hi," Michael replied. "How are you?" "Good. Better. And you?" "Getting by. Tyler is much better. He's speaking normally again, doing well in school. That's good. I always knew he was a strong boy. And Brandon? He's studying law at night, working hard to pay his own bills." Michael nodded. "He called me last week." Melissa was surprised. "He called. He wanted to apologize to me in person, said he was saving money to reimburse me for the losses I suffered because of the whole mess." "And what did you say?" "I said I accept the apology, but I don't want his money. I want him to use that money to graduate and become an honest lawyer." Melissa smiled for the first time in months while talking to Michael. "You were always too generous." "It's not generosity. It's an investment. If Brandon graduates and becomes an upstanding professional, that will help other families in the future. It's more useful than paying me back." They stood in silence for a few seconds, each with their shopping cart, like regular strangers who happened to meet. "Michael," Melissa finally said, "you once said that maybe we could be friends when the wounds healed." "I did. Do you think they've healed?" Michael thought carefully before answering. "Some have. Others are still healing. But I think we can try." "How about some coffee? Just coffee as friends." "Just coffee," Michael agreed. They went to a small bakery near the supermarket, sat at a corner table, and talked for almost 2 hours. They talked about work, about how things were tough in the city, about plans for the future. They carefully avoided touching on very personal subjects or the recent past. When they said goodbye, there was a lightness in the air that hadn't been there for a long time. "It was good talking to you," Melissa said. "I thought so too. Maybe we can do it again. In a few weeks." "Maybe," Michael agreed, but this time with a small smile. The coffee date repeated 2 weeks later, then a month later. Gradually, the meetings became more frequent and more natural. They were careful not to create expectations beyond friendship, but there was a genuine affection being reborn between them. Tyler was the first to notice the change in his mother. "Mom, you've been happier lately." "Have I?" "Yes. You've started singing again when you're cooking. You hadn't done that in a long time." Melissa hadn't even noticed, but Tyler was right. Having Michael back in her life, even if just as a friend, brought a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Brandon also noticed the change, though he was more cautious about commenting. He knew that any possibility of reconciliation between his mother and Michael depended largely on how he himself would handle the situation. It was on a Saturday night, almost a year and a half after the confession, that Brandon made an important decision. He called Michael and asked to talk in person. They met at the workshop after hours. Brandon was visibly nervous but determined. "Michael, I know you've already forgiven me, or at least said you've forgiven me, but I needed to talk to you about something." "Go ahead." "My mother still loves you, and I know you still love her." Michael was surprised by the direction of the conversation. "Brandon, let me finish, please. I know you're both trying to be just friends. I know you think it's the safest thing after everything that happened, but I can't live knowing I destroyed my mother's chance at happiness. You didn't destroy anything, Brandon. Things happened the way they had to happen." "That's not true. I did destroy it. But maybe there's still time to fix it." Brandon took a deep breath before continuing. "I want to ask you for something. Give us a second chance. Our family. Not for me, because I know I don't deserve it, but for my mother, for Tyler, for Mrs. Dorothy. Brandon, it's not that simple." "I know it's not simple. I know you're afraid to trust us again. But I swear to you that I will never lie again, never hide anything again, never put my problems above the family again." Michael looked at the young man and saw a maturity that wasn't there 2 years before. Brandon had paid a high price for his mistakes, but he had learned from them. "And if I decide to try again with your mother, will you be able to see me as your stepfather again, knowing that I know everything you did?" "I will if you can see me as your son again, knowing what I did." It was an honest question that deserved an honest answer. "Brandon, I never stopped seeing you as my son. I was disappointed, hurt. But the love I have for you hasn't changed. What changed was the trust. And can trust be regained? It can. With time, with patience, with consistent actions." Brandon extended his hand to Michael. "So will you give me that chance?" Michael shook the young man's hand, feeling that this was truly a new beginning. Brandon's request planted a seed in Michael's mind. In the following days, he found himself thinking more about Melissa, about the coffees they had together, about the conversations they shared, about how good it felt to be near her again. He realized that, little by little, without noticing, he had fallen in love with her again. Maybe he had never stopped loving her, just buried that love under layers of hurt and disappointment. The invitation came on a Thursday evening. Melissa was leaving the school where she worked when she found Michael waiting at the door. "Hi," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to invite you to dinner, a real dinner, not just coffee." Melissa felt her heart race. "Michael, you don't have to answer now. Think about it carefully. But I wanted you to know that these months of friendship have shown me that there's still something special between us. I know there is, but you're afraid. I'm very afraid. Afraid of hurting you again. Afraid that you won't be able to trust my family. Afraid of being selfish for wanting a second chance." Michael moved a little closer. "Melissa, I'm afraid too. Afraid of opening up again. Afraid that something will go wrong. Afraid of losing you all again. But I'm even more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what if." Melissa looked into Michael's eyes and saw the same sincerity that had won her over years before. "If I accept having dinner with you, it's not just dinner, is it?" "No. It's the beginning of us trying again. Slowly, carefully, without rushing, but trying. And if it doesn't work out, then at least we'll know we tried." Melissa fell silent for a long moment, weighing all the possibilities, all the risks, all the fears. "All right," she finally said. "Let's have dinner." The dinner happened the following Saturday at a small, cozy restaurant in downtown Pittsburgh. They talked about everything and nothing, laughing at silly things, remembering good moments from the past, making cautious plans for the future. "Michael," said Melissa during dessert, "if we're going to try again, there's something you need to know." "Go ahead." "I'm not the same woman I was 2 years ago. What happened changed me. It made me more distrustful, more careful, sometimes harder. I'm not the same man either. I've become more cautious, more observant. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing." "And can you accept my children again, knowing everything we know now?" Michael thought carefully before answering. Tyler was never the problem. He was a scared child trying to protect his brother. Anyone in his place would have done the same thing. And Brandon, that will be more difficult. I won't pretend it's easy, but I see that he has changed, that he's trying to make amends, and above all, he is your son. If I want to be with you, I have to accept your family. Even if it's difficult, especially because it's difficult, the easy things have no value. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Melissa and Michael made the right decision to try again? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.